Hello and welcome to the Skift India Travel Podcast. Lately in the Indian aviation world, we've been hearing a lot about the challenges faced by Indian full-service carrier Vistara-Air following a news of its merger with Air India. Today, we have with us Vishal Bhadola, the founder and CEO for EyeforSky Aviation Consulting. Vishal and I will today discuss about the recent disruptions at Vistara and what that means for its merger with Air India, and of course the broader implications for the Indian aviation industry as well. Thank you for joining us today, Vishal.
Thank you for having me, Peden. Good to be with you.
Same here, Vishal. Vishal, I want to start by discussing the recent disruptions at Vistara, of course, which include a significant number of flight cancellations and delays. And these have been primarily attributed to crew unavailability. Now, there have been about 150 cancellations and 200 delays exceeding 2 hours in about 4 days. Vishal, with almost a 2-decade experience across airline management, airport management, aviation training, and consultant, I'm sure that you would agree that this isn't a small number by any standard, isn't it?
That's correct.
So, what do you think is happening there at Vistara right now?
Sure. So, Peden, first up, as you mentioned that in only 4 days, so many disruptions, cancelled flights, delayed flights happen. But what needs to be understood is that this is kind of surfacing of an issue which has been in the making for a while now. It's not something which has happened overnight. It's not something which has materialized in a matter of a few weeks or months. Because ever since its start in 2015, Vistara is an airline which has earned a lot of repute among its passengers, among the aviation community in general, and seems to be having pretty smooth growth for last several years. Then how come all of a sudden there is so much of disruption which snowballs in a matter of a few days and becomes so big and messy that the regulator has to step in, the minister has to step in, etc. So to actually fully understand what may have happened, which has resulted in this, one needs to step back and see, what's actually has transpired in the last perhaps 2 years. Actually, 2 years is a fairly good good timeline to look at, especially because it coincides with two main things. One, the effects of COVID easing out from Indian aviation somewhere in 2022, and also the takeover of Air India by the Tata Group, which are also the shareholders in both the airlines. So these two are parallel tracks which have been running alongside last 2 years with whatever has happened at Vistara. So as we say in aviation, usually most of the big issues or events or anything undesirable in aviation doesn't happen on its own. Actually, it usually follows an error chain or a chain of events, as we call them. So very quickly, if I were to give you a background, there are largely three main areas which I feel have coincided and led to the situation which we see today, or what we have seen in the last 2 weeks. One, as I mentioned, since 2022, Vistara is an airline which has been trying to grow, take advantage of the post-COVID growth in Indian aviation, especially the travel rebound in India. And a host of measures are taken by Vistara to capture this growth. Second is a merger, as I also briefly touched upon, which is happening on the side. And obviously, since the shareholders are common between the two entities, there seems to be some sort of impact, whether material or not, of activities happening at Air India on Vistara. And third element is the key human element here, which basically the focus obviously is on the pilots right now in terms of crew unavailability, which you also mentioned at the start. Mm-hmm. And here's a bunch of people who obviously are affected the merger, the anxieties related to what's going to happen with the financial freedom or stability, what is going to happen in terms of the seniority of the merged entities, etc. However, while a lot is discussed about the pilots generally, and especially these days, but I think these issues related to the human factors and elements are common not just to pilots, but any other person working in any other department at Vistara or Air India. So these are basically three main tracks. Now, uh, ever since 2022, if we just take a 2-year horizon, we will see that post COVID, around the same time, actually, say Q1 of calendar year 22, this was a time when Indian aviation was coming out of the COVID impact. The travel was rebounding quite a lot, and anybody in Indian aviation wanted to capitalize on this, and Vistara was no different. And that is why you will see that Vistara around March of, say, 2022 was, say, about 50 aircraft airline. And in the next 2 years, it has grown from a 50 aircraft airline to a 70 aircraft airline, which is almost a 40%. And these two, when these are all deliveries which have happened, so even by taking deliveries of the aircraft which were ordered earlier, still Vistara has managed to capture this growth. If you look at briefly the numbers, and I'm not going to get into numbers here, but generally, if one were to take a sense check, the productivity in terms of the employee productivity, the aircraft utilization, all of these numbers are pointing in the right direction for Vistara, that the airline has taken a conscious effort in the last 2 years to really grow and capitalize on the growth which I mentioned. Now, while this is happening at Vistara, one of the key things which Vistara has done, which actually relates to the issue in question right now, but unfortunately, perhaps is missed in the general discussion around, is somewhere last year, or in fact 2 years back, in 2022 around September, Vistara came out announcing that it is switching to a new and advanced method of rostering both the pilot and the cabin crew. Now, this new system of rostering uses technology. Obviously, it aligns with the regulatory system which is established, in which usually we call FTTL, or flight duty time limitations. But it also allows for more flexibility for the rostering department to move around people from one place to the other. And ultimate objective is, as an output, to deliver higher productivity from the same number of resources. In this question, say pilots. Now, this has happened in September of 22. And one of the things which has resulted out of this is that with a defined number of resources which are available to the airline, in terms of higher number of flying, or the hours which can be produced from the same number of resources, goes up because of the way the rostering happens in a tech environment, where manual intervention is minimal as compared to the earlier version where it was more manually driven. Now, obviously it leads to higher productivity. Obviously, the airline would be happy about that, but would all the pilots be happy about it? I'm not sure. Why? Because one of the key differences which happen here is that this system, while it encourages pilot to actually choose, whether they want to fly more, whether they want to fly more out of their home base, but it doesn't suit everybody. And hence, some of the pilots may really appreciate flying more and flying out of their of the bases which are not their home base. And obviously, it leads to higher salaries also in terms of the allowances which are created.
Okay.
But some of the other pilots may not really like it, because for them, the impact on this more travel out of their home base to the new stations which are allocated to them on a weekly basis may be seen as interfering with their personal lives, less time for family, etc. and hence not everybody is obviously happy with this. However, this is an issue which has been managed well, and hence, while as I said, some people are happy, some may not be as much. But however, the operation goes on, the airline is able to generate more output because of the system. Now, if we quickly switch on to the other side of the equation, which I mentioned in merger, if you look at Air India around early 2022, when Air India was taken over by Tata Group in terms of the operational takeover, ever since a host of activities have been done, streamline the operations and improve the quality of service, etc. Now, one of the key things which is related to this particular case is last year in 2023, Air India moved on from a different system of minimum guaranteed pay to the pilots, which earlier was about 70 hours a month, to 40 hours in a month. This obviously has a significant impact on a group of pilots, more specifically the young co-pilots, and not so much on the commanders. So obviously everybody is not very happy about it. However, another key turn of events around the same time, which coincides with this entire episode, is the unfortunate grounding of GoAir around the same time. And what it does is that there's a glut of pilots and generally other manpower also, but more specifically the pilots in the market. And hence, if you look at from a demand supply equilibrium point of view, the Air India pilots who have been resisting the switch from 70 hours to 40 hours now don't have a choice but to switch to the 40 hours regime and accept it. That has continued from Air India, but earlier this year, when the mandate from Air India goes to Vistara, because the two airlines are now closing in on the actual merger in terms of the paperwork as well, because the approvals from all the competition commissions are started to come in, etc. This is the time when the management decides that the contract at Vistara for pilots need to be streamlined to look very similar to the one at
to the Air India one.
Yeah. And that's where the problem starts. Now, again, as I mentioned, the chain of events or the error chain. This is also the time when there are other developments happening in the industry. There is one issues of congestion at Mumbai Airport, right, where suddenly airlines are asked to cut down some of the flights. So, like most other airlines, what Vistara does is take out some capacity from Mumbai Airport, which it cannot use because of the capacity limitation which have been set in by.
Vishal, if I'll come back to you about the Mumbai Airport congestion part, but if I may want you to explain a bit about this, about the fact that, as a layperson, I'm telling you that if, Vistara earlier had, the 40-hour flying, right, which was changed to 70 hours later when they went to the new rostering system.
No, those are not related. Peden, because Vistara had 70 hours until now. The system for 70 hours until now, because of the new roster.
So because of the new rostering, that was right. Because of the new rostering, only the way to utilize the crew is changed. It has got nothing to do with the way the payment or the salaries are paid. Okay. So Vistara pilots were always paid for 70 hours.
That's correct.
That's what the guaranteed flying hours were always 70.
That's correct.
Okay. And so, but then it keeps changing. It's not specific. It's not that it's not regulated. The guaranteed flying hours keep changing from airlines to airlines, right?
That's correct.
Like Air India has 40.
That's correct. So it is up to the operator to decide, how much guaranteed flying they want to pay to the pilots. But but how much you use the pilot in terms of how much the pilots actually fly, only that part is regulated by the government or the regulator. So many hours in a month, or so many hours per day, or so many landings per day. That is something which is regulated by law. However, how much you pay for that, or what is the structure of the salaries, that's the government.
So you were saying that, okay, so we've understood that the reduced flying hours also result in salary cut, right? Because they're paid by the hour. So it can be seen, of course, to some it might be that they have more personal time on hand, but to some, but especially the first officers that you're referring to, it's more of a salary cut that they have to incur. And additionally, pilots are also concerned about seniority issues post the merger, right? And they're saying that it's going to have an impact on their career progression within the new combined entity. So could you explain a little bit about what this seniority means, when you work for a particular airline?
Mhm. Yeah. So as you rightly mentioned, Peden, so while salary is one issue, and I might want to clarify here that the change of structure, uh, you know, could likely impact the amount of salary also. However, it is not cast in stone. In fact, the system allows, the new system actually allows for a pilot to do the same number of hours, but because the rates for the allowances for certain work are different, you as a pilot can actually end up earning the same amount of money, or actually more amount of money as well. It's just that it is not guaranteed anymore, right?
Yeah.
That's one critical difference. Now, switching to seniority, as you mentioned, typically what happens is that in an organization, just like any other job profile, the pilots also have a role of seniority in terms of how many flying hours you have, how much experience you have on a particular kind of aircraft, what kind of trainings you've been to, etc. And hence, in a combined entity, that too, in a complex merger such as Air India, where there are 4 different entities being brought together, when you combine everything in terms of the resources coming from 4 different airlines, you are basically trying to see that in my merged entity, what will the pilot pool in terms of resources and seniority look like? Because as we all know, Air India has ordered a pretty significant order in
Flight
terms of
order. Yep.
of Boeing aircraft, Airbus aircraft, wide body, narrow body, and hence most pilots aspire to grow from a narrow body aircraft to a wide body aircraft, from domestic flying to more international flying, to and third, in terms of number of hours that they accumulate. And all of these opportunities, so to speak, are also handed out to the pilot based on the seniority that they have in the organization, just like it happens in any other organization for any other department.
So, Vishal, can you also, you were explaining the congestion at Mumbai airport. So can you explain that point as well?
Yes. I was trying to mention that this is the time in the last few months when there are certain other factors were at play. One being the congestion at Mumbai airport, which basically meant that the government put a cap on how much capacity can be deployed from Bombay airport. And since it was reduced in terms of number of flights which could be operated, Vistara, among other airlines, had to pull out some capacity, and that capacity was allocated to a different base, more specifically Bangalore, for example. Now, you could actually move an aircraft overnight, so to speak, from one base to the other, but getting around pilots for the new base, additional pilots, is not that easy, right? Because here we are talking about movement of people. So issues like this, along with, for example, around the same time, Vistara has had also to give some of its resources, both in terms of aircraft as well as people, to Air India Express, which operates the 737, which were earlier operated by Vistara. It operated them, and also certain pilots which were given to Air India Express, to help them use the 320s, which they had never done. So all these three or four things, and then there were issues with the bird strikes, some of the aircraft not operating. All of these factors actually contributed to coming to a situation by late March where the system in terms of the rostering was feeling sort of a stretch, right? Did it mean it was hampering safety? I would like to believe that is not the case. However, in terms of the flexibility of an airline to reallocate pilots, should a pilot report sick or should a flight be cancelled, that flexibility definitely gets hampered because of the operational reasons which I just mentioned. Right now, coming to the last week of March, where everything snowballed, is something also which is now perhaps widely known, that this was the last day or last couple of days of the financial year. The sick leaves were going to be go unused, and hence some of the folks thought that why not we make use of them. All of these things sort of snowballed and led to a situation where the crew availability reached a point where the system just not was able to handle that. And obviously, in aviation, because one aircraft makes sort of a kind of a circuit where if one flight is impacted because of crew unavailability, it's not just one flight which will suffer. There are hosts.
It's like a domino.
It's
effect,
like a domino effect. So that put together, Peden, is why why we saw what we saw during March 31st to April 3rd or 4th.
Yeah, Vishal, of course, Vinod in his letter to his employees had also mentioned, all these reasons. But there is, of course, and the pilots, the fact that, the leaves don't carry forward, and the fact that they have to use up their leaves by March 31st is also very much there. But was this also a silent way of pilots protesting? These were mass leaves that pilots were taking, right?
Of course, and that's the third element which I had mentioned briefly at the start, Peden. It's a group of people, trying to protect their financial interests, and obviously it's a matter of opportunity, right? Just as Air India had tried to do this, there was a sort of a carrot and stick approach. The stick being, the Go Air grounding, which happened at that time. However, at this time, if you see, there is no stick, right? So the pilots had a way to obviously voice their concern. Some of them had done it earlier as well. But however, as I said, it was not as alarming because of the new roasting system, the more flying out of their home base, which was happening. It was not alarming as such. It was something which at least a section of the pilots did not mind because of the lifestyle that they were quite okay with, and obviously it comes in with the different allowances that you can make more money out of. However, this time, obviously, this is the time when I'm sure that there are certain individuals who would feel that the merger is on the card now, it's imminent, and let's voice our concern in a sort of a manner where they are heard. And unfortunately, pilots or any such profession which is a critical function for an airline is something that any IR issues or any disgruntled set of employees is very, very visible, right? Anything happens at the airport, it is immediately noticed everywhere in all walks of life because of the impact it has on people going here and there for their important work, etc., etc. So I would say that you're right. It may have been a strong show of strength as well as raising their concern, and other than the sick leave, perhaps, it was decided that this is the way we want to be heard.
Yes. And so, Vishal, if we are looking at the big picture, how will these disruptions impact Air India's plans for its, merger with Vistara? Does the alignment of pay structure, between Vistara and Air India, which has led to significant dissatisfaction among the pilots, does it add more complexity to the merger process?
Yeah, the answer is a yes and no, and I'll explain that. Peden, does it add more complexity? Certainly, because trying to integrate two airline is complex enough to start with. However, if there is a uh, uh, group of employees, more specifically the pilots, which are unhappy about the kind of revisions which are made to their salary structures, and the disgruntlement is compounded by some of the archaic issues in this domain related to the notice period of pilots, etc., which make it difficult for a pilot to actually move to another organization quickly if he or she is not happy about the pay structures being revised. So obviously it adds to the complexity for the merger process of Air India. However, uh, any merger, and especially an airline merger of this size, is anyways a very, very complex affair, right? So this is one of the issues which people who are handling the merger, who are planning the activities, I am sure they are cognizant of the kind of issues which will pop up. And fortunately, this is not the first time that any airline is experiences these things. So there are a host of different activities which the merger process needs to take care. And pilots, as I mentioned right at the start, are actually only one group of individuals which need to be had a chat with, and which a sort of a common middle ground needs to be found. However, we need to give a shout out to many others actually from various other departments who
Correct.
are equally.
Absolutely. Cabin crew is another one, right?
Yes,
I
yes.
mean, like,
Even ground staff,
they might be
people.
having their own concerns.
Yes, yes. The
Yes, of
people
course.
people in corporate offices, everybody is impacted. It's just that there is a group of employees which is much more visible, much more heard than perhaps some of the others. And obviously, the lever is the criticality of their being or not there on the day of the flight.
Mhm. Vishal, of course, Vistara has been saying that it's actively working to stabilize its operations. Vinod sent out a letter saying that the worst is over. And it's talking about addressing the crew shortage and optimizing crew planning. And of course, they have also talked about deployment of large aircraft, and they are planning to integrate Air India's pilots into Vistara's operations on a deputation basis.
Yes.
Now, these are some of the steps that they're taking to ease some of the operational pressure, right?
Yeah.
But do you think this is enough? Because after Vistara pilots, we also heard that two associations of Air India pilots have also joined them and talked about the fact that they kind of in solidarity.
Yes. No, that's correct. So, yeah, obviously, these measures have been taken, and I think the most important being the scaling back of operations for the next month or so, which was announced, about 10% of the capacity being scaled back. Obviously, it will give some breathing space to the airline and to the rostering department to sort of see how um, normal operations, at least on the reduced schedule, could be done swiftly, along with the other measures which you mentioned, including pilots coming in from Air India. So, I don't think this can be limited to just a month. It will obviously percolate down the year, at least for a couple of months, if not more. It is bound to happen. One, and second is whether this will suffice. For now, I think it's a matter of having a breathing space, having to sit down with the pilots and ironing out these issues, because as I mentioned earlier, during the merger, this is pretty usual stuff, right? It's not something which is happening only because of these issues. I'm sure people are talking to each other in terms of finding a middle ground which can be acceptable to both. Now, Air India pilots, as you mentioned, have showed support or sounded their support for Vistara issues because they were on the wrong side of the table just last year. And it is not a surprise. However, now it all depends on the Air India Vistara management to sort of to see that what is the right way to sort of decide this structure, because I am sure they would not foresee a situation where one set of pilots will have a different working condition than the others. So one set of guidelines in terms of their use, their salaries, etc., which meets the demand and of the employees as well as the demand of the airline in terms of the schedule that needs to be flown, is something perhaps that they are working at right now.
Yeah, of course. That is the internal issue between Vistara and Air India. But Vishal, what do you think is the greater ramification for it as far as India's summer flight schedule is concerned? And the disruption, how is it going to affect the broader Indian aviation? Because if these operational challenges persist, because Air India and Vistara were also set to increase the number of flights for the summer schedule.
Yeah, so Peden, luckily, the capacity being scaled back by Vistara, which represents about 10% of their capacity, represents about 1% capacity of Indian, because Vistara has a 10% market share, or roughly 10%. So a 1% capacity cut, I would like to believe, is not significant enough to actually have a material impact in the overall direction and magnitude of growth for Indian aviation. However, it just adds in to the already capacity-related challenges which the market is seeing because of the groundings of aircraft by Indigo because of issues with the Pratt & Whitney engines. So it's just one more layer of capacity going out of the market. And luckily, as I said, it's not something which which is going to have a very significant impact. But as we all know, Vistara works on or was trying to develop a hub model, more specifically out of Delhi and a bit into Mumbai. So there are certain routes where the impact of this capacity cut would be felt in terms of the capacity, the frequencies, the number of options for passengers, and perhaps the fares as well. However, it would be really difficult to decipher, in quantitative terms, how much the impact on fares would be, because anyways, the next couple of months are peak travel summer months.
Correct.
And the airfares, anyways, were expected.
Yes, they are already what we were not expecting them to be. Right.
Yes. So just to conclude, in terms of the overall direction of the Indian aviation and the growth potential of Indian aviation, I would like to believe that this issue is not significant enough to actually put a lasting dent on that growth aspiration of India. However, more specifically about the merger of Air India and Vistara, and obviously this airline is something that a lot of Indian aviation growth depends on. That is something that perhaps needs to be dealt with in real quick time. But I think in terms of Indian aviation, we are fairly strong fundamentals, and I don't see this level of issues with a particular airline, that too where it's only about 1% or 2% of capacity moving here and there. I'm not sure whether it will have a lasting negative impact. Peden?
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today, Vishal. It's been really enlightening to understand the complexities surrounding Vistara's current situation, and of course the implication for the Indian aviation landscape. Thank you for being there.
Thank you very much, Peden. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. That wraps up this episode of the Skift India Travel Podcast. Stay tuned for more updates and discussions on the latest developments in the world of travel. And don't forget to subscribe to the Skift India Travel Podcast on your favorite listening app. Thank you very much.
This has been the Skift India Travel Podcast. Thank you for listening.